What's up, guys? It's Cooper Carter here for G66, and in this week's Fractal Friday, I want to go over 5 tips to help you get the most out of using in-ear monitors with your Fractal audio systems Aspx 3, FM9, or FM3. Over the last 5 to 10 years, in-ear monitors, or IEMs, have gone from being somewhat an exclusive feature of large tours, high-grossing acts, to something that you see across the spectrum of performance, from your smallest bar bands to theaters, praise and worship venues, pit orchestras, all the way up to, of course, your arena and stadium acts. And the benefits of using in-ear monitors are many and varied, and that's a topic for a completely separate video. But suffice to say that if you are watching this video, you're probably already hip to the fact that in-ear monitors provide enormous benefits when compared to using onstage wedges or relying on a guitar cabinet for your sound on stage. Namely, there's a lot of sound isolation, so you're saving your hearing, which is great, but then also in-ear monitors provide an enormous amount of clarity and consistency. Because of the isolation, you can dial in a really clear mix at a relatively low volume level. And then also when you move around the stage, you've got the same mix everywhere, as opposed to with cabs or with monitors, you might have a great mix in one space, but then you move, and of course, you're not in front of those speakers anymore. You've got a completely separate mix. So a couple weeks ago on the Fractal forum, there was a user that asked, what are some tips for dialing in a Fractal system for use with in-ear monitors? And I listed a couple of things that I've found really useful over my years of working with some of Fractal's largest artists, who normally are on in-ear monitors. And of course, as I mentioned, IEMs are something that are really accessible to pretty much everyone now. You can spend a couple $100s and get some really great sounding in-ear monitors. You can get either a wireless rig or a wired in-ear monitor system and have great sound all over your stage. This is something that really any player can get access to, and if it's something you value, you can include it in your live rig for relatively an affordable amount of money, and the benefits are huge. Now, when going from an analog system like an onstage analog amp and cab, going into an in-ear monitor system can at first be a little isolating, and it can take some getting used to. So here are 5 of my top tips that I think really help to not only arrive at great tone with your Fractal system through an in-ear monitor system, but can also really help ease the transition from a really loud rock and roll environment where you've got a lot of sonic reinforcement on stage to the admittedly somewhat isolating first experience scenario of going in-ear monitors. And I promise that if you take these tips to heart and you stick with it through a couple rehearsals, you will very quickly see the benefits of going to in-ear monitors. So tip number 1, dial your tones for live use with your ears in, firmly in. Take the M in the acronym IEM in your monitors at its word and treat your IEMs as your monitors. If you used a cab on stage, this is now your cab. If you used wedges on stage, these are now your wedges. You're not only going to dial in your tones, but you're going to get them to the point where you're enjoying them enough in your ears to rock out. This is your reference now for what you hear on stage. You don't want to take them out because then you've defeated the purpose of the sound isolation, and you're also not going to get the full mix. Now, admittedly, at first, again, if you're coming from an analog rig or you're the kind of guy who plays with really loud wedges right in front of you, this can be a little isolating. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that you can do to really increase the quality of the sound in your ears so that you don't feel compelled to take them out in the middle of a show. Long story short, when you decide to go to in-ear monitors, your IEMs are now the cabinet or the wedge that you used before. You don't want to take them out. You want to rely just on those for your sound. Number 2, volume. This is probably the most important part. Make sure you have a nice loud guitar sound in the room itself when you're dialing in your tones. So you're keeping your ears in, you're listening to your in-ear monitors, and you're making all of your adjustments based off what you're hearing in your ears. But, and this is very important, you want to be feeding your guitar some sort of sonic reinforcement. This can come from a full range flat response speaker, a FR/FR system. It can come from studio monitors cranked up, like my Genelec ones here, or it can come from a standard guitar cabinet. Whatever it is, it's fine. You just want to make sure that there's a good amount of volume in the room. Now, again, you're not going to be listening to this. You're listening to the ears, you're dialing in using the ears, but you better believe that your pickups are going to be listening to that sound. The natural feedback, and I'm not talking about feedback, but the feedback loop, the sonic reinforcement that's happening between the pickups and the sound waves, the body of your guitar and the sound waves, all of this contributes to making a guitar tone. And anyone who's ever played under headphones will be very easily able to tell you that guitar tones just don't really sound that great and don't really feel that good when you're under headphones. And that's because there's nothing in the room. There's nothing feeding back into the guitar itself. So you want to make sure that when you are dialing on in-ears, you've got a good amount of volume in the room. And if you get on stage and you find that you're missing having a cabinet go thump and shake the stage when you really go chunk chunk on your guitar, or if you're feeling like there's just something missing, not having some volume down front from wedges, then go ahead and throw some wedges there or throw a cab behind you. It's really not going to matter because you'll be hearing the great sound you've already dialed in your ears, and you can recreate the experience of volume however you want, but you won't be damaging your hearing and you'll have a clear mix. But most decent sized PAs you'll find will give you the kind of reinforcement, the feedback, the sustain that you would normally have from using wedges or a cab on stage, and you'll still be hearing what you want from your ears. The third tip is a quick one. Check your work against a good full range flat response system while you're dialing in your tones. Again, you can spend even a couple $100s these days and get a really great sounding pair of in-ear monitors, but periodically while you're dialing in a tone in your ears, go ahead and check it against a nice pair of studio monitors, a PA speaker, whatever you have is probably fine. But again, this is just sort of a sanity check to make sure you're not completely off base. My inclination is that you probably won't be unless you're dialing with AirPods or something. Please don't do that. Again, you can spend a couple $100 and get perfectly adequate, really nice sounding generic non-molded in-ears, or you can spend around $1,000 and get a great pair of molded, custom fitted in-ear monitors with multiple drivers. Now, of course, you can spend more than that, but like with anything else, there are diminishing returns to in-ear monitors. $1,000, a little bit around there, is about the sweet spot. So again, you're going to be doing all of your primary tone dialing on your in-ears and then checking periodically with a reference speaker in the room. So this brings us to number 4. Why do the primary dialing in your ears? Well, because if it sounds great to you in your ears, I'm a big believer in the fact that you're going to play better, you're going to have more fun on stage, and the audience is going to get a better show for it. Again, even decent in-ear monitors in the sub $500 range are going to give you a great representation of what you'll be hearing at front of house if you follow the steps that I've outlined so far in this video. So get happy with the sound in your head, and I promise you front of house is going to be happy with what you send them, and the audience is going to be happy with what they're hearing, not only because you've dialed in a great tone, but because you're going to be having a better show. Let front of house do their job. They might make changes to your sound. You're not going to hear that out front. What you're going to be hearing is the sound that you've spent the time dialing in rehearsal or in your studio. And the beauty of in-ear monitors, especially when paired with something as consistent as a Fractal rig, is the sound that you dialed in then is going to be the sound that you hear night after night on stage. So finally, let's talk about some Fractal specific tips. So far, all of these things could generally be applied to any kind of in-ear monitor rig, whether you're going direct with some other type of modeler or you're using an analog rig with ISO boxes off stage so that what you're hearing in your ears is pretty much more or less direct. But there are a couple things that we can do inside of Fractal units specifically that I think can really contribute to a nice in-ear monitor mix. First off, if you are one of those guys that wants a little bit of sound reinforcement on stage, let's just tap off of this preset here before the cabinet block. So we've got a fully modeled signal going to front of house. And then on stage, we've got a line without a modeled cabinet that you can send into a power amp and physical guitar cabinet on stage for a little bit of that oomph that you might be missing. Next up, whether or not you're fortunate enough to be touring with a monitor engineer night to night who can dial in your sound, why not split what you're sending to front of house and keep it completely separate from what you're sending to your ears? That way you can add effects that you know you want in your ears without affecting front of house. Some of us in the industry refer to various in-ear monitor mixes that we've heard from performers as God mode, because there's just a perfect mix of amazing reverb and a great stereo space. And this is something we can very easily recreate with a Fractal product by just putting on a super expansive reverb and maybe taking the mix down a good bit to create a really big space that, again, because we're on a separate line, we're just hearing in our heads. We can also add the enhancer block, which is something that doesn't really translate that well at front of house, especially given that a lot of PAs are in mono. The enhancer block is just expanding the stereo space of the preset, and this can sound really nice in your ears. So here's the sound without the enhancer, and then with it. And for an even more pronounced effect that's kind of approaching a double tracking effect, we can add a pitch block that I've designed here to mimic the TC Electronics Mimic pedal. We've got some pitch shifting that's slightly detuned up and down with a little bit of delay, and I'm actually modulating the various parameters with some LFOs to add a little bit of a dynamic feel to it. This is going to create a really huge sound in your ears, and because it's not just relying on stereo effect, it also has a little bit of pitch shifting. This is something you could very easily put on the main line and send to front of house for a little bit more expansive sound. Long story short, as guitar players, sometimes we want some extra effects because it just makes us play better time to time. And this isn't a crutch, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that, a little reverb here and there, some pitch shifting effects, some thickening effects, maybe a chorus, a little more drive, whatever you want to put on this separate line that's just going to your ears that makes you play better. At the end of the day, if you're playing better, again, it's a better show. So there's nothing wrong with adding a bunch of effects to your ears mix if that's what you want to hear. And it's very, very easy in a Fractal unit. You won't be washing out the front of house signal with a bunch of effects that may or may not translate well and could really just kind of busy up a mix. And also you won't be relying on a monitor board that might have subpar effects compared to the amazing reverbs and everything else in a Fractal unit. So those are 5 things that I like to keep in mind when dialing in a tone for use with in-ear monitors. I hope they've given you an idea of what a best practice really is for getting a great tone and committing to using in-ear monitors live. The benefits of really doing the work to get a great sound that you're happy with night to night are huge. And if you guys want to dig even deeper into your Fractal Audio Systems unit, go to classes.coopercarter.com for my complete Axe-Fx 3, FM3, and coming soon, FM9 Masterclass series. For all things Fractal Audio Systems, keep it right here on G66. I'm Cooper Carter, and I'll see you guys next week on Fractal Friday.